everyone, my name is Faye Graham, and the topic that I'm presenting on today is water. What is water? It's a vital molecule for all life on Earth. It plays many roles and is capable of many things. Water is very polar due to this oxygen's stronger pull on these two hydrogen molecules, creating partial negative and partial positive charges. This allows it to dissolve other polar and ionic substances by forming attractions between the charged parts of its molecule and the other molecule. So, what can water do? Water is a universal solvent. Its polarity makes it great for dissolving other substances, allowing cells to absorb nutrients, minerals, and chemicals necessary for biological processes. It's also good for chemical reactions. It facilitates and is responsible for many chemical processes involving proteins, DNA, and enzymes. It also makes a great transport medium. It's the primary vehicle for transporting nutrients both within the body and within the environment. It's also very important for temperature regulation. Due to its high heat capacity, it helps it to regulate body temperature and the temperature of the environment around it. And finally, it's also very important for photosynthesis. It's crucial to this process, which produces oxygen and energy that is fundamental for life on Earth. Moving on to issue 1, environmental transport of chemicals. What is environmental transport? It's how the chemicals move through the environment. And how do they do this? Using the water cycle. Processes like evaporation, condensation, precipitation, infiltration, and runoff. It's not just the water that's cycling through these systems, though. It's also suspended and dissolved chemicals such as natural ions, pollutants, and organic compounds. As it moves through reservoirs, the chemicals partition between phases and sometimes transform chemically as well. So some key processes and the chemistry behind them. The first one is evaporation. Only volatile substances, those having high vapor pressures, can move through this system. For example, volatile organic compounds such as benzene move through surface water to the air. Non-volatile solutes such as salts and metals get left behind. Henry's law describes how a chemical partitions through air and water. Chemicals with a high Henry's law prefer to be in the air. They have high volatility. Those with low Henry's law prefer to stay dissolved in water and will bind to sediments. They have low volatility. Those with high volatility will evaporate with water, which is called volatilization. These highly volatile chemicals can travel long distances once evaporated, called the grasshopper effect. This can be mediated through emission controls, reducing sulfur and nitrogen oxides at their sources. This prevents acid-base reactions that create acid rain. The second one is condensation and precipitation. As water vapor condenses, some atmospheric chemicals can dissolve into the droplets. For example, acidic gases like SO2 and NO2 dissolve into water droplets and form a new product. In the case of SO2, it forms sulfuric acid, which is extremely acidic and forms acid rain. As rain falls, it brings these compounds with them and can also grab airborne particles and gases, forming new products along the way, bringing them down to the surface, which is called wet deposition. And the same mediation strategies for issue 1 apply to these. The third one is runoff and surface transport. As rainwater flows over land, it dissolves and picks up soluble chemicals, like fertilizers, and carries suspended particles. Depending on a chemical's chemical characteristics, such as pH, ionic strength, organic matter, or hydrophobicity, it will stay dissolved in the rainwater or adsorb to surface sediments. For example, lead can bind to negatively charged clay or humic substances instead of staying dissolved. This can be mediated by buffer strips and wetlands, as well as sedimentation ponds, as it encourages absorption and biotransformation to less mobile or toxic forms of chemicals. The fourth one is infiltration and groundwater flow. As water percolates through soil into groundwater, it takes dissolved chemicals with it. Nonpolar organics can absorb into soil organic carbon. Metals may precipitate as hydroxides, carbonates, or sulfides, depending on redox conditions or pH, which would remove them from the flow. We can mediate these by adjusting soil chemistry, adding permeable reactive barriers, or using phytoremediation. These use solubility equilibria and redox manipulation to make pollutants less mobile. And the final one is uptake and transformation. Microbes in plants can absorb chemicals dissolved in water and can often biotransform them into less or more harmful forms via chemical transformation. For example, nitrate, which is very soluble and can cause eutrophication in water bodies as it runs off into them. However, certain bacteria will use nitrate for respiration, which turns nitrate to nitrogen gas via a redox reaction in a process known as denitrification. And this can be mediated by bioremediation, bioaugmentation, and phytoremediation, as it leverages redox and biochemical pathways to convert pollutants into less toxic and less mobile forms. Why do these cycles matter? The chemistry and movement of these chemicals through the environment and the water cycle determines their persistence, bioavailability, and pathways of exposure. Understanding these factors helps us to predict contamination and spread from things like oil spills, pesticide drift, or nutrient runoff leading to eutrophication. So here are some larger remediation strategies to help with these issues. Watershed management is very important as it controls fertilizer and pesticide use, protects against erosion, and adds vegetation to adsorb chemicals and reduce entry points. Atmospheric hydraulic coupling is also important as it limits emissions that later affect rainfall chemistry. And finally, restoration ecology, such as restoring wetlands, riparian areas, and forest coverage to restore natural chemical buffering systems. And now we come to our second issue, algae blooms in Lake Winnipeg. What causes them? The main driver of algae blooms in freshwater lake ecosystems is excess nutrient input, known as eutrophication. Nitrogen, in the form of nitrates and ammonium, and phosphorus in the form of phosphates, but particularly phosphorus, are normally limiting nutrients in freshwater ecosystems. But, with human interference, are finding ways to enter these systems via agricultural runoff, wastewater discharge, and atmospheric deposition, which accelerates the eutrophication process and bloom development of algae. So how does eutrophication cause algae blooms? Algae and cyanobacteria growth and reproduction is reliant on nitrogen and phosphorus, as they are essential for building amino acids, proteins, and nucleic acids, as well as making ATP and phospholipids. When there is excess nitrogen and phosphorus in the water, these organisms will use that to their advantage, growing explosively and leading to an algae bloom. Why are algae blooms bad? Eventually, the algae and cyanobacteria die and sink, and when they do, decomposers, in the form of bacteria, will break them down, a process that uses dissolved oxygen in the surrounding water and produces carbon dioxide. As dissolved oxygen drops, it causes fish and other invertebrates to suffocate and produces anaerobic conditions, which anaerobic bacteria will take advantage of and produce gases like hydrogen sulfide and methane, worsening the water quality. On top of this, many algae are capable of producing toxins that can be harmful to other organisms living in and around the ecosystem, including humans. So let's talk about algae blooms in Lake Winnipeg. The water quality in Lake Winnipeg has been deteriorating for many years. Its water catchment area is very large, meaning that the proportion of nutrients and chemicals that enter that area and leach into Lake Winnipeg is very large. The catchment area is also bordered by lots of agricultural land, as it is mainly throughout the prairie provinces, meaning that a large portion of these leached nutrients are nitrogen and phosphorus from fertilizers. Due to these factors, eutrophication and algae blooms have been a major issue in Lake Winnipeg, and they've been getting larger and more frequent in recent years. For example, have you ever tried to go swimming at Grand Beach in recent summers and couldn't because it was closed? That would be due to a particularly toxic algae bloom occurring in the area, deeming it unsafe for humans and animals to be in and around the water. These blooms have also been threatening the lake ecosystems, creating hypoxic areas that suffocate all other life, which puts the fisheries at risk due to death of large numbers of fish that have been suffocated by the hypoxic environment. So what can be done? Going back to our mediation strategies for runoff and surface transport, as well as uptake and transformation from issue 1, there are several ways that we can attempt to mediate the causes of nutrients getting into Lake Winnipeg. For example, retention ponds can be built to intercept water flow across the landscape and to capture nutrients, as well as riverbanks and lake shorelines can be stabilized. Wetlands can be restored, and native shrubs, plants, and trees can be planted in watersheds to help with phytoremediation. Fences can also be built to prevent livestock from entering lakes and rivers and polluting them with nutrients. So, finally, in conclusion, due to water's unique characteristics, such as its polarity and solubility, it has the ability to transport nutrients and chemicals throughout every reservoir in our environment. Water connects everything, which means we need to be incredibly careful about what ends up in our freshwater ecosystems. If we are not, we are going to see an increase in issues such as eutrophication, which will wreak havoc on our freshwater ecosystems, suffocating life, impacting fisheries, and the health of all organisms that rely on them. All the water that will ever be is right now, so we better do our best to look after it.